Pressure flips went from first being invented to being played out and uncool in about 2 years. What happened to this trick and why is it so hated? Let's take a look. Welcome to Rad Rat Video. Here on this channel I make topics from all over the skateboard world, from game reviews to interesting topics from history to the invention of certain tricks like the pressure flip. If you like the sound of that, hit the subscribe button. Before we get started, let's just define pressure flips. It's a lot more than just the basic inward heel flip one. So a pressure flip is any trick that flips because of the way you pop or scoop it. So you've got the inward heel flip version and the hard flip version, but also straight ones and 360 and big spin variations, and it goes on and on. Technically, toe flips are part of the pressure flip family too, but they aren't a major part of the story here. And those flip like a varial kickflip. So pressure flips exploded into skateboarding in 1991. In 1990, you didn't see them at all, and then suddenly everyone and their brother was doing them in 91. It caught on like crazy and became one of the biggest fads in skateboarding. The fact that it blew up so fast and got so big actually might have been one of the things that killed it off, but we'll get to that in a minute. So many people were doing them at the same time that it made it hard to track down who invented it. If you look it up, you'll find the same Rodney Mullen ad that comes up all the time, and it gives him credit for the 360 pressure flip in 1983. But it's not the pressure flip you'd think of. Like a lot of Mullen's early tricks, the names changed over time and it's confusing to read about it today. Chances are this is talking about a toe flip, but it might be something totally different too. I haven't seen any early footage of him doing a toe flip, but it's at least safe to say that it wasn't a 360 inward heel flip style pressure flip. It was just way too early. If you dig a little deeper, you might find this obscure article that seems to give credit to Ron Nigg. I got stumped at this point for a long time until I had the most obvious thought in the world: I need to ask Nate Sherwood. If you don't know about Nate, he is the king of the pressure flip. He's been doing them since the early days of the trick, and he took it further than anyone else I've ever seen. I haven't met him personally, but we've had some back and forth over the years, and I asked him about the history of the trick, and I got a very thorough answer. This guy lives and breathes skateboarding, and he was able to rattle this off the top of his head. So, according to Nate, the inventor of the straight and shove-it versions of the pressure flip is Chris Fissel. You know, a lot of people credit him with changing skateboarding. Before him, no complies, bonelesses, one-footers, and stuff like that were all cool. Then after him, it was all about late flips and pressure flips. I didn't know that he invented them though. His part in 1281 shows his early mastery over the trick, including nollie versions and all kinds of stuff. Nate credits Ron Nigg for the first 360 pressure flip, Willie Santos for the first big spin one, Mike Carroll for the first hard flip one, Rick Howard for doing it to manual first, and a lot of other details. Damon Bird was a huge name in pressure flip history too. His part in Right to Skate has some new variations like a pressure half hard flip, late half flip. Nate gives him credit for doing it to no slide first, and he also has a 360 pressure hard flip in his part, which may have been the first as well. Nate himself landed a few variations first, like fakie big spins, full cabs, 360s in both directions, which he calls Blizzard backside and El Nado frontside. By 1992, this trick was everywhere. Even Rodney Mullen was doing them in questionable. You couldn't get away from the trick. In 93 though, they were pretty much gone. Ron Nigg, who just invented 360 pressure flips, doesn't have a single one in his video part in 93, and instead lands possibly the first 360 inward heel on video instead. So what happened to the trick? Why did it die out? Let me tell you about video parts in the early 90s. They were full of fluke tricks. It was all about getting your board to flip in a new way. Nowadays it's cool to look back and have all this stuff filmed already as a foundation, but at the time it got to be pretty bad. Video parts were full of tricks that were really sketchy, or even bails that are cut really quick to look like they were landed. The Plan B videos even have fake lines where the tricks are all actually done separately. See how there isn't a second camera in that first angle? On top of that, print magazines weren't doing so great either. Since all of the hot new tricks were really inconsistent and hard, shooting sequences on film didn't really cut it anymore. You would waste a couple $100 on multiple rolls of film to get a trick, and in the end the frame rate of the camera would be too low to even tell what was happening. So they started running sequences that are just ripped from the videotapes. They don't look good at all, but you could pull a ton of frames from it, and it was cheap. But after a little while, people got too sick of that stuff. They wanted the days of flowing around and going fast to come back. Wheels had gotten down to about 38 millimeters, which is like wrapping some masking tape around your bearings, and that's pretty much it. It was good for switching grinds, but not good for much else. So in time, going fast, popping tricks clean, and getting height were getting more and more popular, and that meant getting rid of the tech stuff from before. Late flips and late shoves were forgotten about, and also pressure flips. But to me, pressure flips are just a scapegoat. If you ever hear them brought up today, it's always either as a joke or an insult. You'll see people say something like, "That guy has such good style, he could even make a pressure flip look good."
Pressure flips. Pressure flips kind of older trick. It's like, what?
Dude, seriously? Pressure flips?
Yeah, what? It's old school. We're doing old school stuff, right?
Yeah, but pressure flips?
Yeah, it's like a flip trick.
No,
older.
dude.
No.
You're on your own on this one. I have nothing to do with it.
But does the trick really deserve its reputation as being ugly and awkward? Here's the thing. Go back and watch footage of pressure flips from back then. Yeah, they were really low and sketchy, but that was the style in general at the time. Look at other tricks from that era too. We just talked about how sketchy a lot of stuff was back then. It didn't have anything to do with pressure flips in particular. But let's look at this article from the third Big Brother magazine, which came out in the fall of '92. This article might have been written by Rodney Mullen, or maybe it's just uncredited and it's a sequence of him next to it. It's not very clear. Anyway, the article is about how skateboarding has no rules, but here's how to make your skateboarding stronger. And here's what it says. Pressure flips went in and out violently. Yesterday, we saw hordes of kids inching along, drilling their toes into unbelievably awkward foot positions. Then with a long drag, a little flip would shyly hug the ground. Contrast that with Jason Lee's 360 kickflip. A crack of the tail, caught high and clean, no setup, and full speed ahead. There's nothing wrong with pressure flips and late shove-its in themselves. Javante caught pressure flips with no real setup at all. It's just that some tricks have different limitations than others, and good skaters know how to make the best of what's there without overdoing it. So let's look at these claims. First, he mentions inching along. The thing about pressure flips is that the tail drags a little bit longer than other tricks, so if you do them slow, they can bite into the ground and not work. Or they can eat up some of your speed and you'll land going a little slower than you started. This is fair, especially in comparison to a 360 flip like the article mentions, but it's really no worse than sliding out the last few degrees of a spinning trick, like a backside flip. The article also says that the foot position is incredibly awkward and they're really low. So back when I learned these with a friend about 2005 or so, this is the foot position we used. It's basically like a 360 flip, but maybe even more balanced than that. Even 360 pressure flips aren't that bad. The frontside stuff can get a little awkward though. Excuse how sketchy and bad some of my old footage is here. As for the height, we better not use me as an example. Let's go back to Nate Sherwood. He can do them up onto stuff, over stuff. He has no problem getting height and doing gaps with them. The only thing I could see as a small issue is the fact that the board can get pretty vertical, and it can be tough to clear certain types of gaps with them. But that's not really a problem for Nate, and not a reason to hate the trick. But another weird reason I read is that it makes your board wear unevenly. I mean, sure, it wears the side of your tail down a little bit more than the other side, but anything that scoops, like a 360 flip or an impossible, will do the same thing, if not to such an extreme degree. The last reason I could find, and one that has a bit of merit, is that it's just too easy. Any kid can go out and learn this trick and have them clean in an afternoon, and that puts it in the same category as a varial kickflip. But, of course, there are other variations like big spins and different stances, so I don't think this is a major problem either. You know, I do a lot of research for this channel, often blindly. I'll just read interviews and articles and watch skate videos and just make notes at the time in case anything that I read about will come up in a video. And here's the thing. A lot of times, pros from the 90s are asked what they thought about all the tech stuff at the time, like the late flips and the curb dancing and the pressure flips, all that kind of stuff. and I don't think I've ever seen anyone admit that they thought it was cool at the time. Everyone wants to act like they secretly didn't like it and just had to do it to keep up, but that's obviously not always true. It's not like the whole industry was nothing but people who hated what they were doing at the time. And I think that just speaks to the peer pressure in skateboarding. As soon as it became uncool, everyone distanced themselves from it and pretended like they hated it all along. Now, I get it. Being a pro at the time might not have been the best. Having to race to be the first to do an obscure new variation, then hurry up and get the video out before someone else released theirs, that kind of stuff might have sucked, but obviously a lot of people were into it at the time. Okay, so the trick came out, pretty much every variation was landed, and then it was killed off in about 2 years. So how does everyone know about it these days? Why didn't it stay dead? It's still not mainstream in pro videos, but you'll still see the trick from time to time, and I'll give you 2 answers. First is the bits and pieces of pro coverage that was starting to come out. Nate Sherwood had a couple of tricks in 411 around 2000-2001, namely issues 42 and 49, and then a big part later in 2007. Maybe a few more, haven't seen them all yet. He was also featured in some small videos around that time. I knew about him because he actually had one of the best freestyle decks available back then. He doesn't really skate freestyle though, it was kind of a marketing thing. But his big break came in the Big Brother March 2003 issue. The whole issue was about weird skaters, but I think they treated his skating with a little respect. In the multi-page article, there are lots of pictures and sequences of different variations like 360 pressure flips, big spin flips, pressure hard flips. It's funny though, even though he's in the magazine mostly because of his pressure flip tricks, they didn't bother to label most of them right. This clearly isn't a shove it, and this obviously isn't a backside heel flip. Having his skating in the magazine like this really shone a spotlight on the trick and exposed it to a lot of people who hadn't seen it before. Big Brother wasn't one of the big skate magazines at the time, but there were still a lot of readers. Another example is PJ Ladd's Wonderful Horrible Life in 2002. This video part is one of the top 5 video parts ever made. When it came out, it blew everyone's mind and rocketed PJ Ladd into fame and stardom. It was a very influential part, and it helped spark interest in some tricks like gazelle flips. Here he does a fakey one. But also in this part is a line of pressure flip variations, namely toe flips. It's kind of a throwaway line, he doesn't even land the big spin one, but still, PJ Ladd was cool, and this was a new trick for a lot of people. It might have gotten people interested in the whole category of tricks and eventually into the more standard ones. Around that same time, Jamie Thomas' part in Chomp on This has a no comply pressure flip manual, no comply pressure flip out. The whole part has a lot of weird, off the wall type of stuff, but it's Jamie Thomas. He can make anything cool. Second is the Tony Hawk games. It's hard to overstate how important the Tony Hawk series was as a tastemaker. In high school, a lot of skaters I knew refused to learn tricks that weren't in the game, since they weren't real. If they didn't put them in the game, they must be fake joke tricks that nobody actually does. So, for a lot of the younger skaters at the time, the Tony Hawk series was one of their only links to the outside skateboarding world, unless they had a big local scene in your town. Anyway, when the Underground game came out in 2003, they added in pressure flips. They did it in a really awkward way though, by adding in pressure as a stance. And that leads to some weird stuff like pressure ollies and pressure varial heel flips. But all the real tricks are there too, from 360 pressure flips to toe flips. A lot of kids saying this didn't do pressure flips at the time, but it wasn't because the trick was uncool. It's because they had never seen it before. They weren't skating 10 years prior when they died out. Seeing the tricks in the game added some legitimacy to them and caused new skaters to start learning about the trick, and maybe searching for it on the internet. Forums and video sharing were starting to pop up online, and people sharing tricks and ideas helped as well. Trick tips were starting to pop up, but mostly in written form at this point, and pressure flips are hard to understand without video. I made some video trick tips for a couple different kinds around 2007. These days, there's a lot more footage of every kind out there, and it's easy to learn any trick from any era in skateboard history. Those parts from the 90s are just a click away, and you can search Instagram tags and watch all the pressure flips you want. So, is the pressure flip coming back? Eventually, I think it will. At this point, most people who hate the trick weren't even around when it became uncool. It was 25 years ago. It'll just take some people doing it with a lot of style to really inspire it to catch on again. And I hope it happens. There's nothing wrong with having more trick options instead of seeing the same stuff all the time. And to be fair, I think the pressure versions of 360 hard flips and inward heels actually look better, but that might just be me. So how about you? What do you think about the pressure flip? Do you want it to ever come back? Do you think it will? I have new videos coming out like this all the time. Main ones like this are every Tuesday, and other features throughout the week. Subscribe if you don't want to miss anything. But until next time, here are some recent videos of mine that you might like, and thank you for watching.